Patrick. I'm one of the patisserie teachers here at Southbank, and today we're going to make some sponge or some puddings, which is a hot dessert in your hot and cold dessert class. We're making two types of puddings. One is a traditional vanilla sponge pudding, and the other one is a chocolate and hazelnut and ginger pudding. To begin with though, we need to start by preparing our moulds. I've already prepared some here, but I'll do a couple to show you. We've got one mould lined with almond meal, one lined with sugar, and one lined with flour. We start with some melted butter, which I've got here in a takeaway container, and you'll need a pastry brush. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take our butter, we're just going to line our mould, so make sure that you go around and you completely brush the butter inside the mould, including the bottom. And then we're just going to turn that upside down for a moment. We'll just do all 5 of these. I've got some caster sugar here, so all we do, just take it inside the cup and just spin it round, and then when it's completely covered, give it a gentle tap out like so, and they're ready to go. Then we'll make our filling, and of course we'll also need to make sure that we have in advance a dish, because a pudding is baked in a moist environment, and so therefore we're going to place our moulds inside this dish, and we fill it about 1/3 with hot water, and then we bake it in our oven, but we also make sure that we cover it over the top so it maintains a nice moist environment. So we now have all of our equipment that we need ready to make our pudding. We have our dishes, we have our foils, and we have our ramekins, which are greased and ready to go. So we're going to start by making our vanilla sponge pudding, and we have all our ingredients in front of us. We have our sugar and our butter, we have here our milk, and I've added some vanilla. I've got a little bit of vanilla powder in here as well with my flour, my baking powder and my salt, and it's a soft flour for a nice soft short texture in the sponge pudding. And I've got my eggs. Because I'm dealing with so few eggs, it's easier if I beat them with a fork to begin with, because it makes the addition easier later on. Now these puddings will rise in the oven, so therefore what's going to make them rise is the creaming of the sugar and the butter, and also the addition of baking powder. So we have both physical and chemical aeration. What's important though is that we don't overbeat the sugar and butter. If you make it really, really, really light, and then you've got baking powder, it can actually blow up and then collapse. So it needs to be creamed nice and light. We need to get a good emulsion with the eggs, but you don't need to beat the absolute life out of it. So we're going to use a KitchenAid mixer here, and we have attached our paddle, and this is what we're using. And we're going to start by placing our butter and sugar into the mixer, then we'll cream that nice and light, we'll gradually add the eggs, then the dry ingredients, which are all mixed together, will be added in along with the milk, and we'll get a nice smooth batter. So it's been a few minutes, and if we look inside the bowl, and I might just turn it off for a moment and tilt it forward, you can see that it's quite light and creamed and aerated. It's also important that periodically that we scrape down everything from the top and the bottom so that we get a nice even mixture. Now we add the eggs. Don't add all your eggs at once, because all that liquid going into that butter emulsion will just split it straight away. So we add a few at a time, a little bit at a time, and we can see here, over we go, that it should incorporate in nicely. Now, this has quite a lot of eggs in it, and it may split depending on the room temperature. Just like making a cake batter, if it does split, we can add a little bit of our dry ingredient into it to bind up that excess moisture and to re-emulsify so that it creams lightly. It looks like it's doing a pretty good job so far. And once that happens, then these last 2 ingredients can go in alternatively, and we're pretty well done on our pudding. We've got a nice light mixture there, and we can now add to that our flour and our milk. Now don't overbeat it, because what we know about flour is that it has gluten, which is the protein. And we know about gluten that when we add liquid to it and we mix it together, it forms a dough, and that's toughening. So that's developing the gluten. So if you put these in now and beat it for a long period of time, you'll actually toughen your pudding mixture and it will not rise level, it will have a bit of a dome on it. So don't do too much of that. So a little bit of our flour can go in. We'll put about half our flour in and just on low speed, bring that together. And as we do that, we can also add our milk with our vanilla in a thin stream. And then our remaining flour. And that's our pudding batter to start with. Now we can choose a variety so we get different, you'll get different appearances on the outside. With the sugar and butter you get a really nice smooth appearance because the sugar breaks down in the baking process and gives it that nice smooth edge. With the flour it gives more of a skin on the outside, and with the almond meal it gives it that nice texture. So it makes it nice and, I guess, looks a little bit fluffy. Then paddle a disposable piping bag. Turn the bag over to cover your hand like a glove. Don't overfill your piping bag because if you do, you'll just struggle. Hello? You'll just struggle to fill it. So, that'll be enough mixture. Close up the piping bag and then cut the end off. What we're doing here, make sure that you don't leave any plastic on the bench, and we're just going to fill them to about 2/3, just like that. Might even turn that over, probably see it a little bit better. We're now going to place these into the dish. We make sure that we give them adequate spacing in between. I'll show you in a second when I finish with this one. 3, 6, 9. Now we won't put, and that's our spacing there. We won't put them in the oven yet because we'll make our second pudding and then we'll pop them all in the oven together. We're going to make our second pudding, and here are all our ingredients. We have, instead of whole eggs like the last pudding, the sponge pudding, we have egg whites and egg yolks. We also have divided our sugar. We have our butter in with about half of our sugar. I've also got in here some grated ginger. In here I have sponge crumbs, cocoa, almond meal and grated couverture chocolate. And in here I've got some rum and a little bit of vanilla. It's similar to the last pudding, but we don't have a chemical raising agent. There's no baking powder. The aeration comes from the meringue, from the egg whites and the sugar. So this one won't rise as much and it'll be a little bit denser, but it'll be moister and have a finer texture. So we start again with our butter and sugar, and I'm putting my ginger in at the beginning because it'll help to ensure that it's distributed all the way through. So that goes into our first mixing bowl. Again, we're using a paddle. What I can do at the same time is I can also get ready for my meringue. So my meringue will be over here, and I'm using a clean bowl and a whisk. But we'll start with our butter and sugar. Again, we started on low, and we're going to cream it till it's nice and light. You can see here that our egg yolk mixture is nice and light and creamy. You can see the ginger in there, but that's now ready. So what we now need to do is we need to focus on the meringue on the egg white, because we don't want to over whip it, because if we do it becomes dry and grainy and difficult to fold in. So as this meringue starts to come up, we can add our remaining sugar, just rain that in, and we just want a nice soft peak. So you can see now that if I draw it up, it holds that nice peak, and that's about what we want, just a nice soft peak there. So we have our butter, sugar and egg yolks creamed together nice and light with our ginger. We have here our soft peak of meringue. What we can do part of our dry ingredients that have been mixed together can be folded in together. And we can begin to add some moisture from our rum and our vanilla. We'll just give that a fold together. Make sure you scrape everything down from the top and bring everything in from the sides. We're just going to add them in to begin with. We'll leave a little bit of our dry mixture out to the side. And this is the base of our batter. I'll take a little bit of my egg white and begin to fold that in. And see how I get everything up from the bottom of the bowl as I fold. And we can begin to add some moisture from our rum and our vanilla. We'll just give that a fold together. Make sure you scrape everything down from the top and bring everything in from the sides. We're just going to add them in to begin with. We'll leave a little bit of our dry mixture out to the side. They're going to go into our dish. And we just space them out evenly. Then we take some hot water and we're just going to fill our mould. We need to fill the dish approximately 1/3 is sufficient. So we have our water inside our containers. Our containers are spaced out evenly, and now we need our aluminium foil. Because these dishes are very high, we can just use straight aluminium foil. If you believe that your dish is not high enough and you think the pudding's going to touch, you need to grease your foil. We seal up the mould on 3 corners, these 3 to begin with. This one, we fold it back just so if there's a little bit of too much steam, it can escape. That stops any condensation forming inside the dish, and therefore we don't get any moisture dropping back onto our pudding. So you can just see there, I've got myself a little hole for the puddings to breathe. Open up this corner here. Now these are ready to go into the oven, especially because this one has baking powder in it. Don't leave it on the bench once it's in contact with the hot water, because you'll start to split the butter, the pudding mixture will collapse, and also the baking powder will react before it goes in the oven and your pudding will be too heavy. So now we're going to go over to the oven and we're going to place them in the oven on the correct settings. We want our oven temperature set at 180 degrees Celsius, just below the 200. We're going to set our timer on 5 for 50 minutes and turn it on. We'll make sure our plates are on the medium to high for the top and the bottom elements. And we're going to make sure they go in nicely, and they're going to clear the side walls of the oven as the deck rotates round. There's a damper on the side. Make sure that damper is closed. Now these will take quite a period of time, anywhere up to an hour to bake. So make sure you have adequate time when you make this, that you can then bring them out of the oven, let them rest for 10 minutes, and then you can plate them. What I will do while I'm waiting for this is I need to prepare to plate some. So the one thing I'm missing is I have to make sure that I have some hot plates. So I'm going to put them in the oven next door.